Hello everyone and welcome to my channel. My name is Kalika and you're gonna be a super spicy person after watching this video. Dance director invokes ProRevenge on himself. Here's another little tale from my days of working in theatre. This takes place in the mid-80s, names changed to protect the guilty. So there I am, sat at home with my feet up watching a bit of telly with her indoors and nursing a rather fine single malt when the phone goes off. It was Jake, a dance director I'd worked with some years previously. Now Jake was not exactly the nicest individual. He was arrogant, possessed an ego the size of a small planet, and was generally a right royal pain in the fundament to work with. Still, I was curious to know why he had called me up after so many years. He informed me in breathless tones that he was putting together a new dance company, utilising the best and brightest dancers and choreographers, and was soliciting my skills to handle the sound design. He had also booked a major West End theatre for an afternoon to host the showcase performance, where I had been invited a whole slew of potential serious moneybackers and members of the press. In short, this was supposed to be a prestigious event to not only highlight a dancing troupe with some serious chops, but also highlight some of the very best choreographers currently working. The ultimate plan was to take an expanded version show on a UK and European tour, for which my services would also be required. One choreographer in particular, Alex, was at that time enjoying huge success with a big West End show, both as a choreographer and director, which had also garnered a number of major awards. Alex was also a personal friend of mine. We regularly drank in the same pub of a lunchtime and evening. He was the sweetest guy imaginable. Despite his fame, he was utterly without pretension and was a popular member of our little group of creatives who also drank there. What Jake was asking me to do was comparatively simple: edit together the music tracks that were going to be used in the showcase, together with a few sound effects. This was at best about a day of work, and I would cop for a couple of £100 for my trouble. In other words, a nice little earner for very little effort. There was also the pleasure of working professionally with Alex, as well as potentially more work down the line, so despite my initial misgivings at having to work with Jake again, I agreed. A few days later, I coordinated with the 6 choreographers involved, got their requirements, and went to work. One particular SFX required some eerie synth-generated noises, so I got my friend Bill to create that for me, as he had all the kit to hand and he was a bit of a whiz in that regard. I assembled the show master tape, laid out rehearsal cassettes for the 6 choreographers, and waited for show day. Come the day of the showcase, I turned up at the theatre together with my friend Bill at about 1 PM. The show was scheduled to start at 2. I checked with the sound operator and made sure he was happy before going backstage. We found a slight air of panic with Jake. According to him, only a small handful of the 200+ people invited had RSVP'd. I made the observation that this was not necessarily a bad sign, and reminded him of the time that we'd done a showcase in Belfast some years previously under similar circumstances and still got them turning up. Bill and I then slipped off to the pub next door for a swift one, and then shortly before showtime, went back into the theatre where we elected to sit in the dress circle, to better observe the proceedings. Expecting to see at least 150 people sat in the stalls, we were shocked to see less than a dozen. Uh-oh. The first act then opens to a virtually empty house. Clearly, something has gone terribly wrong. Act 1 finishes, and we trot off backstage to be confronted by Jake having a full-on nuclear meltdown. It was then, in the middle of his tirade, we discovered that he'd taken out a second mortgage on his house, around £25,000, to fund the whole shebang. Almost none of the invitees had turned up, and he was now facing the prospect of losing his home. Bill and I discreetly withdrew to the theatre bar for some medication before returning for Act 2. At the end of the show, we go backstage to offer our commiserations, inform the cast that we were going to go to our local and that people were welcome to join us. Jake was still in full rant mode. We repaired to our local where over the next half hour or so various members of the entourage trickle in, all with further intelligence regarding the fiasco. One thing we did learn was that Jake had apparently neglected to send the invites out to the potential backers until a few days previously, frankly insufficient time for the major financial players he was targeting to schedule into their busy diaries. There was also supposed to be an after-show party that evening at one of the big local restaurants. We debated whether it was going to be polite to turn up, but decided that we should go, even if it was only to express our sympathies. Also, free food. Big mistake. After drowning our collective sorrows in the pub, we eventually went en masse off to the restaurant. There we found Jake looking like he was about to suffer a massive coronary. The atmosphere was, shall we say, icy to say the least, as we ordered our food. Our meals arrive, and as we start to chow down, Jake launches into another expletive-laden diatribe against the entire assembled cast, dialing up the rhetoric to 11. In particular, he reserved particular vitriol for Alex, citing that due to his success with his current show, he should have done more to help pull the backers in. This was absolutely not Alex's responsibility, it was entirely Jake's, but he was seeking to deflect his own inadequacies onto others. We sat there appalled as Jake continued to castigate Alex, while getting in a few punches at the rest of us, and all the while declaring that we had to pay for our food, despite the assurance that Jake was picking up the tab as previously promised. Visibly upset, Alex stood, told Jake to go and frick himself and stormed out of the restaurant. Jake now turned his attention to critiquing the rest of us as incompetent fools, and expressing his opinion of Alex's talent, claiming that he was a third-rate choreographer, despite Alex winning awards for Best Musical and Best Director a few months previously. Enough. Now seeing a deeper shade of red than I had ever experienced, I stood and gave Jake an epic full-on 16-inch broadside, expressing my utter outrage at the way that Alex and the rest of us had been treated, and using enough swear words to make the average naval rating blush violently. I then declared that I was leaving, and that any like-minded people could join me in our local. Brushing aside the maitre d' who had come up and insisted Bill and I pay for our meals, I pointed him in the direction of Jake and claimed in no uncertain terms that he had invited us, he will be picking up the tab. A few minutes later we were back in the pub, where we found Alex wrapping himself around a large vodka and was visibly shaken at the encounter. I felt obliged to hug my friend, whereupon he burst into tears, something that I'd never seen Alex do before. As I'm consoling Alex, the rest of the cast turn up and report on the absolute meltdown that ensued after we left. Apparently it was so spectacular it involved the local constabulary. Can't say I was surprised. In need of further decompression, we decided to go off to a late night drinking club where we all got well tanked. It transpired later that Jake was indeed totally screwed financially over the situation due to his own utter incompetence. Arguably, the first case of someone unwittingly enacting ProRevenge on themselves. I feel like to really make that story pop, I would have to go back and read it in a very thick British accent. Demand proof of illness? Hope you have eye bleach. I had a boss one time who was such a control freak that she demanded to know specifically why I was calling out sick. Wildly illegal where I live. And for reference, I'm typically the guy who never gets sick, so it wasn't an attendance issue. I told her I think I had food poisoning. It turned out to be true, and I actually wrote a ULPT based off the story a while back. And she kept pressing me to explain what my symptoms were and why I couldn't make it in, all via text. I had finally had enough and was like, look, I'm not physically capable of working today and you're not allowed to ask me personal questions about illness and medical history. She threatened me with a write-up if I couldn't specifically explain or prove why I couldn't make it into work. This is where the ProRevenge comes in. I was about to send her something horrific that she could not unsee, and she wouldn't be able to do jack about it, since she technically asked for it. Being that I was living in the bathroom for more than 2 days, this inquiry was day 1, and had aggressive diarrhea every 15 to 30 minutes and the worst abdominal pain I've ever experienced, I lost my crap, har har, and took a pretty disturbing picture of me painting the bowl brown right before I flushed, and sent it to her. No joke, it looked like I power washed the inside of a toilet with feces and built a turd island in the middle of the water. It honestly looked like a poop volcano had erupted. I had no idea your bowels could contain so much. This is happening every 15 to 30 minutes and I haven't been able to leave the bathroom for the last 6 hours. Here is your proof, check the timestamp. Also send a screen of the timestamp. I'll let you know as soon as I can if I'll be in tomorrow. So, after 3 days off, I show up for my shift, sleep deprived and sore from sleeping in my bathtub or on the floor for 2.5 days. A-hole's not having any of it, but I was finally through the worst. She immediately escorts me into her office where a regional HR rep is waiting for me, and we all sit down. He has paperwork in front of him and is discussing the incident with me and gets me to acknowledge what I did and that sending unprovoked and offensive content to co-workers constitutes harassment and blah blah blah. Right before he asked me to sign a final write-up. If you do something like this again, you're fired. Before signing, I ask him, did she tell you why I sent this? He was dumbfounded and said this isn't really excusable and basically handed me a screenshot printout of the text message where this witch deleted everything in the exchange, except for me saying, sorry but I need to take a sick day today, and then the picture. I laughed and handed him my phone and said, here is the full exchange. He asked me to leave and give them a few minutes. About 10 minutes later, he calls me in, by myself, and explained what I already knew, that she was the harasser and that she had aggressively violated privacy laws and would be dealt with, and to call him if anything like this ever happens again. I find out from one of the assistant managers that she ended up getting a final written notice and was super close to being fired, and it prevented her from getting a big promotion that she was being looked at for. So, if you ever come across a D-head boss who wants to play doctor and question your sick leave, Send them diarrhea pics and they'll either STF you or give you lawsuit material. I love how she tried to get him done for harassment when she basically asked for proof. It doesn't get much clearer than that. And bless her wee eyes, she could probably do with some Marcus bleach, even though she doesn't deserve it. Okay, so that's all for r/ProRevenge. I really hope you did enjoy it. As always, if you do want to see more content like this, then please do subscribe. My Twitter, Discord and Patreon links are in the description, and any support is greatly appreciated. Thank you so much for watching. Bye!